No one sees the beginning. No one claps for the invisible. Before the applause, before the fame, before the voice that would echo around the world, there was silence, a brutal silence, sharp, the kind of silence that only exists where hope has been buried alive. It was Detroit, late 80s, cold, gray, dirty, the kind of place where dreams die before they even learn to walk. And it was there, in the middle of nowhere, that Marshall Mathers was born. A white boy in a black neighborhood, skinny, pale, fragile, surrounded by drugs, violence, neglect, and an absence so present even the air felt heavy. His childhood wasn't a phase, it was a sentence. His house wasn't a home. It was a war zone. His mother fought her own demons. And sometimes he was the target. His father never came back. Friends, only the ones he imagined. And school was just another place where he got beat up for being different. But inside that quiet boy, there was something no one could see. Something buried deep beneath layers of rejection, rage, and loneliness. It was a seed, a rare seed. Fragile, but alive. Because even in the driest soil, if the seed carries the right fruit, it doesn't die. It waits. Waits for the pain. Waits for the time. Waits for the pressure that will break it from within, so it can bloom into something no one ever saw coming. And that's how the story began. Not with spotlights, not with victories, but with silent tears on an old mattress inside a cramped trailer. Before he was Eminem, he had to be nothing but pain. Because before someone is born to the world, they must first be born within themselves. The world tends to ignore silent screams, and Marshall screamed every single day. Not with his mouth, but with his empty gaze, with clenched fists, with heavy breaths, because what he carried had no name, only weight. From an early age, he learned to live on the edge, not the edge of luxury or fame, but the edge between hunger and misery, the edge between neglect and collapse, the edge between going on or disappearing for good. School wasn't a refuge, it was a ring. It was where he was shoved into lockers, called a freak, mocked for the color of his skin, for the strange way he talked, for the clothes too old to hide the poverty, the adults too busy trying to survive, or too broken to notice he was bleeding on the inside too. His mother, drowned in pills, paranoia, and emotional absence. His father, ghost, vanished before he ever knew what love was. By age 9, Marshall already knew the world wasn't fair. By 12, he understood that if he wanted to live, he'd have to fight for it. But around 14, something changed. Not in the world, but inside him. That's when he discovered rap. It wasn't just music. It was a shield. It was a sword. It was the only thing that made sense in a world completely out of control. He started writing verses, rhymes, confessions. At first, on crumpled pieces of paper hidden under his pillow. Then, in notebooks packed with lines, as if each one was a desperate attempt to survive his own mind. And the more life hit him, the stronger his pen became. The more the world tried to silence him, the louder the rhythm in his chest roared. There, in that chaos-filled solitude, Marshall answered the call. There was no light at the end of the tunnel, but there was a beat. And he chose to follow it because a hero isn't born when he wins. He's born when, even shattered, he chooses to keep going. And there, at the very beginning, without even knowing it, he was already telling the world, "You're going to hear me, even if I have to bleed out every syllable." When a dream is born on hostile ground, it has to fight for oxygen. And Marshall's dream was born where no one believed in him. Not because of a lack of talent, but because of the color of his skin. White, in a game dominated by black voices. In a lifestyle that didn't forgive those who were different. In Detroit's underground rap scene, where every rhyme was a battle for respect, Marshall was seen as a walking joke. a white boy trying to rap. Get out of here. You'll never be one of us. This ain't for you. And the whole world seemed to agree. The doors didn't just close. They slammed in his face. In every freestyle battle, he walked in as an intruder, and almost always walked out humiliated. It didn't matter how much he studied rhymes. It didn't matter how fast his flow was, how tight his bars were, how heavy his punchlines hit. It was like his talent was invisible because of his skin. But while the world mocked him, he listened. Every insult, every joke, every mocking laugh. And he turned it all into fuel. Pain became method, rejection a tool, racism a driving force. Because deep inside, the seed was still alive, and now it had started to sprout. He began living two lives. By day, washing dishes, raising his daughter, surviving. By night, he wrote like someone bleeding, rapped like someone screaming for justice. Not for fame. He trained obsessively, studied every syllable, every breath, every word, like it was a ransom note for his own soul. While others wanted quick fame, Marshall wanted to be flawless. He understood early on, to be heard, he had to be 10 times better. So he chose to be 1,000 times more lethal. But the world doesn't change just because you decide. More doors stayed shut, more nights without food, more lyrics rejected by labels that didn't even listen to the full track. And with every fall, he wrote more. With more rage, with more precision, with more truth. Because truth can't be ignored forever. And when pain becomes art, it stops being pain and becomes a weapon. Marshall didn't want fame. He wanted to be heard. And every verse he spit came loaded with a fury that didn't ask for permission. The world didn't accept him. But that only proved one thing. He was exactly where he needed to be. Inside the cocoon, under pressure, being refined by fire. The time of the seed wasn't over yet, but the shell had already begun to crack. Every seed has to break from within before it can be born. And Marshall was breaking into 1,000 pieces. It wasn't just poverty anymore. It wasn't just rejection. Now it was absolute despair. The battles felt endless. But they weren't on stages anymore. They were internal, inside his mind, inside his chest, inside a heart that wasn't sure it even wanted to keep beating. His mother sued him. His partner cheated on him. His daughter, small and defenseless, looked up at him with eyes begging for protection. And he could barely protect himself. He was evicted, lost jobs, was betrayed by friends, humiliated by the industry, ignored by nearly everyone. He was alone, literally, a man surrounded by people, but invisible. Trapped in a world screaming, "You'll never make it." And then came the collapse. Marshall tried to end his life. A handful of pills, an empty room, and the cruelest silence of all, the silence of giving up. But death didn't want him. Not yet, because life still had a bigger plan. And when he woke up, something had changed. Not the world, but the way he chose to face it. He realized he had nothing left to lose, and that was his power. Fear no longer controlled him. Pain no longer bent him. Humiliation no longer defined him. That's when Slim Shady was born. Not as a mask, but as a war cry. A chaotic, dark, cynical alter ego that said everything Marshall had been forced to silence. Slim was the rage of every rejection, the fury of every slammed door, the version of Marshall that no longer apologized for existing. And with him came the mixtape, the one he recorded with almost no resources, but with all of his soul, with razor-sharp rhymes, uncomfortable verses, and a truth that burned like acid. It was raw, it was heavy, it was real, and somehow, that raw truth reached the right ears. The demo landed in the hands of Dr. Dre, rap legend, industry mogul, and for the first time, someone saw the fruit inside the shell. This kid is a monster. This kid is different. This kid is necessary. It was as if, after years in the dark, someone had finally turned on the light. But the journey was far from over. The deal with Dre wasn't a golden ticket. It was just the shot. The first real shot. And Marshall made only one promise. If this door opened, going to tear through it like a hurricane. Because he knew, when pain shapes you, opportunity doesn't transform you. It simply reveals who you've already become. When a seed finally breaks through the earth and sees the light, it isn't a finished fruit, still surrounded by danger. It's a fragile sprout, and so was Marshall. After years buried in pain, he was just beginning to emerge. The hand that reached out to him was Dr. Dre's. Not just any producer, but a genius, an architect of legends. He creates. And when Dre heard that raw demo, full of sarcasm, fury, and unpolished brilliance, he wants blood. He didn't go easy. He had no doubts. This kid isn't trying to sound real. He is real. He doesn't copy. He doesn't want fame. Dre bet everything. And like every true mentor, he demanded the absolute best. Pushed Marshall beyond his limits. Challenged him to refine his lyrics, but his own mind. To channel his rage, to master not just the mic. And Marshall delivered. Because now he had something he never had before. Didn't bring relief. A chance. The Slim Shady LP was born in 1999, and the world finally heard what he'd been screaming since childhood. But fame, it brought war. The media mocked him. The criticism exploded. Groups tried to ban him. Misogynistic, toxic. They called his lyrics violent. The louder he shouted, protests erupted. The government watched him, but he didn't back down. On the contrary, he laughed at censorship. Came something crueler. Respected. Laughed at the critics. Laughed at those who tried to silence him. And the more they tried, because those who've spent a lifetime being invisible don't accept going back to silence. Eminem was everywhere. From the ghettos to award shows. From courtrooms to the top of the charts, a white hurricane in the middle of a black genre. But now, yet with success, internal pressure, the fear of falling, the demand to be perfect, the burden of sustaining everything he had built with his own flesh, because the stage is bright. But behind the curtain, the darkness never leaves. He was still a father. Still human. Still the same kid who got beat up at school, only now the whole world was watching. And inside, the chaos grew. Exhaustion built up. His mind cried out for help, but he kept going. Rapping like a man running from his own shadow. Creating like someone trying to silence the void. Because even with the world at his feet, he still felt the ground cracking beneath him. The seed had sprouted. But the fruit wasn't ripe yet, because success isn't the end. It's just the next phase of the gestation. The most dangerous, the most lonely, the most silently lethal. Every hero dies, not always in body, but in soul, in identity, in sanity. And Marshall died many times, but no one saw it. Because while the world applauded him, he was silently falling apart. Fame brought money, awards, platinum records, trophies, but it also brought blinding spotlights, demanding voices, and addictions that offered quick relief for old wounds. He tried to fill the void with pills, tried to silence fear with alcohol, tried to maintain the image while the man inside withered away. He slept in studios, woke up in hospitals, lost memories, gained enemies, hurt the ones he loved, lost himself. An overdose nearly killed him. 2007, he was minutes away from leaving. Not in a music video, not in a rhyme, but in real life. Silent, tragic, stupid. But once again, death didn't take him. And when he woke up, he wasn't Eminem. He wasn't Slim Shady. He was just Marshall. Naked, weak, broken, empty. And in that emptiness, God spoke, not with words, but with silence. With patience, with the quiet certainty that the boy was still in there. And that it was time to begin again. He let go of everything. The drugs, the masks, the spotlights. He went to rehab, spent months in silence, faced the mirror, accepted that he didn't need to be better. He needed to be new. Because sometimes victory doesn't mean pushing forward. It means stopping. It means bleeding again. But this time for healing, not for applause. He relearned how to live, relearned how to be a father, to care for his body, to train his mind, to write, not to prove anything, but to free everything. And when he came back, it wasn't as a product, it was as a man, as a survivor, a symbol, a living example that pain can kill you, but it can also rebuild you. Recovery, revival, music to be murdered by. These weren't just albums. They were war declarations against his old self. Eminem wasn't reborn as a better version. He was reborn as a pure, raw truth, without masks. Death had cleansed what success had contaminated. And rebirth brought a new purpose. Now his mission was bigger than fame, bigger than rap. It was to inspire, to show that it's possible to fall from the top, to still rise even stronger, to show that chaos isn't the end, but the womb where greatness is formed. And then he came back, not as an artist, not as a celebrity, but as a symbol, a living testament that pain is not the enemy, but part of the plan. Marshall no longer needed to scream to be heard, because now the entire world fell silent to listen. His verses were no longer just rhymes. They were sharpened swords against hypocrisy. They were open scars that inspired others to fight. Every word carried the weight of someone who had died inside and chose to live again. He no longer needed to please. He no longer needed to compete. He already was. The white kid who once slept in filthy trailers was now considered the greatest rapper of all time. The boy rejected by everyone was now quoted by presidents, studied by universities, revered by crowds. But what truly mattered wasn't the stage, wasn't the trophies. It was the fact that he came back whole, came back to be a father, came back to be a mirror, came back to be a legacy, was his greatest victory. And that, not beating others, but conquering himself, taming his own demons, and showing the world that the impossible is just the possible in the process of being born. Eminem is more than a name. He is a narrative, an architecture of pain, discipline, faith, skill, and purpose. He is living proof that no matter how hard you fall, if you keep planting, the fruit will come. Because true success isn't speed, it's gestation. It's loyalty to the process. It's persistence when no one else believes, not even you. And if he made it, who are you to give up? Now that you know the story, now that you've seen where he came from, now that you understand what he had to endure to get where he is, I ask you, with all the seriousness in the world, and you, what are you doing with your pain? How many times have you felt rejected? How many nights have you cried in silence with no one to hear? How many times have you thought about giving up because the world simply doesn't see you? But maybe you're not being ignored. Maybe you're just in gestation. Because the seed isn't born on the stage, it's born in the dark, under pressure, in silence, in discomfort. In the daily struggle of someone who has every reason to stop, but chooses to keep going. Eminem didn't get lucky. He had vision. He had patience. He had faith, even when everything said he wouldn't make it. While others chased applause, he chased evolution. While many gave up for lack of quick results, he kept going, day after day, word by word, verse by verse. And now, the choice is yours. Because the world won't hand you anything for free. But if you have the courage to endure the pain, to walk through the loneliness, to resist the chaos, you can bloom too, because within you already lives what you're meant to become. The fruit is already inside the seed, and the seed is you. So stand up, write, fight, train, repeat, grow. Be silent when you need to, but never give up, because what you want isn't on the stage. It's in the process, and the process has already begun. Pain isn't the end. It's the message. You're being prepared.